So, hi everyone. I am assuming that most of you were in attendance last week, and if you were not, and you have some questions about things that you'll be doing, you'll need to do this fall in order to establish a brand new planting. We can touch on those things as well. And actually, I didn't get a chance to share the first slide. Hold on a second. Let me find my little answer. There we go. So this first slide I meant to show last week, and I don't think we could do that. And I'm going to just go over this soil test report, because one of the things that I would strongly encourage you from a site establishment perspective is to do a complete soil analysis. And in order to do that, you'll need to understand what it says to you. So we're gonna talk a little bit about this. First of all, the web soil survey, which I hope I'm gonna be able to have a chance, and I have a much better connection here at my own home than I did at my mother's last week. So I hope that I can show you the web soil survey. But from that survey, one of the first things you'll get, and there, can people see that little arrow?
Yeah, we can see the
Okay. So number one is the soil name, and in this particular case, it's called Castile. And if you're using the New York Lab Agro 1, which all of the fruit, this is the nice thing, fruit especially, they're linked to the soil types. So if you as a New York State resident put your soil type in there, you will get really fine-tuned information based on the soil type as well as what your soil looks like. So that is very important to know that, and you can find that out from the web soil survey or any soil survey. The second thing you'll want to know is the pH. And when we talked last week about the importance of pH, especially for blueberries, low pH is important. But for all of these plants, knowing what your pH is truly important, because that helps you understand how available the nutrients. So number 3 is all of the nutrients. And this bar chart is an easy way to help you understand. It does give the pounds per acre that are available, but then it shows you kind of relative to what your crop needs, where that nutrient is. And in this particular case, this is 6 pounds per acre, and it's actually still on the low side. Whereas calcium and magnesium are both high, although they're not in the very high realm. So there's not a ton you can do about that, but it just gives you an idea that if you had a crop that was somehow sensitive to one of those, which our fruit crops are not really that sensitive, except for blueberries, that would play a part. And high calcium plays into what we call the cation exchange capacity. So if you have high calcium, it's harder to lower pH. And just knowing that right from the get-go is helpful. Then number 4 gives you the actual recommendation. It gives you fertilizer recommendations, and here in pounds per acre. So you'd have to, or tons per acre. You'd have to change that, tons per acre for lime, and everything else is pounds per acre. You'd have to change that if your plot is smaller. So you'd have to do a little math there. The home gardener soil analysis does not, it puts it into 1,000 square feet or 100 square feet, I believe. But I would really, it's very important to know these things, especially from an establishment perspective. Like before you put in, 15 trees, you want to make sure that it's perfect, or let's say 25 blueberry bushes or whatever that's a fairly significant investment of time and money and energy. So doing this complete soil analysis, I think, is really important. So then number 5 gives you the organic matter, the percent organic matter. We're almost always looking for soil. If it could be over 4%, that would be fabuloso. But above 2% is kind of the bare minimum. And 2 to 4%, I think I would continue to try to have you build that soil with some cover cropping, depending upon what you know, what your crop is. If it's strawberries, you might be able to build it in between strawberry crops or something. Adding straw to as a mulch helps. So 6, these are the other elements, more the micro elements, aluminum, iron, manganese, that is important. And then 7 is just about all the comments. And then 8 is more information about the recommendations. So it's more specific, like it says, apply 80 pounds of acre of nitrogen in July. We don't get nitrogen information on this because nitrogen is a very, I like to use the word ephemeral, but it's just not, it's not there to measure, and it changes very quickly. So it's hard to measure in a soil. But this gives kind of a generic recommendation. 80 pounds in July, another 20 in the first part of September. And that's a good strategy for especially June bearing strawberry. Oops, what happened here? Sorry. So anyway, that's a kind of a rough discussion of the soil test that I think it would be really important that you guys did. And before I move now to more care and maintenance stuff, do you guys have any questions about the soil test?
We have one person that says their soil test report doesn't contain a soil name. I don't know that that's a question.
Okay. Well, you have to put the name in. So if you did not put the name in the beginning when you submitted the sample, they won't put it in there for you because they have no idea. You know, your address is your home address. It may not be the farm. The soil types in upstate New York can change within 50 feet. You could have 3 different soil types. So that's why, you know what, I'm going to be brave. We're going to go right to the web soil survey right now. Do you mind, David, if I try this?
Woo!
Woo! I'm going to try to share the screen again. I'm going to go to the, hold on a second. Let's see if I can find it. Can you see the internet?
Yeah, we can see the internet.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is the web soil survey, and I don't know how many of you guys have used this tool before. A couple of people have. Great. It's a fabulous tool. I love this. So there's the green button, start web soil survey, push on that, and it brings us to this map. Did I show you this last week? I know we had problems with the internet, so I can't remember if we were able to do this or not. And somehow I think maybe we were. But we're doing it again. Sorry.
You can never get enough soil information.
It's true. It's so true. So you just put your address in that box. It finds the location, and right there you can kind of see where the actual pin is. And then you go up here to this thing that's called AOI, which is the area of interest. And I'm just gonna make a rectangle. And so there it is, at that hatch marked area is where we had outlined. And then you can pin the soil type, soil map up here on this upper tab. Click the soil map. I feel like we did do this now that I'm remembering it. I thought we didn't do it. So anyway, so here we go. And look at, and this is probably about maybe a 10-acre piece, maybe not even. And look at all the different soil types that you have. You have this Rhinebeck silt loam, which is the predominant soil type. But say you were putting your raspberries here, and then your blueberry planting here, and then maybe something down here. You'd have to know where this soil type changes, and then you would put you put this map unit symbol and also the name of it on the submission form, and then that's what they use to gather the information. So hopefully that is clear.
We have a couple other questions.
Okay, let's do it.
Do you do a soil test every year?
No, you don't have to. I definitely think before you plant anything, anything at all, it's a really good idea. Why is this not showing? Sorry, it's not going into my, sorry guys, hold on a second. Let me see if I can make this thing go to slideshow. Ah, sugar. All right, I don't know why it doesn't like to do it. Now we're gonna just have to watch it from this. I apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah, you don't have to do a soil test every single year. You should do it periodically, maybe like every 3 to 5 years. When in fruit plants, especially in perennial plants, we have wonderful information that you get from foliar analyses. So those I would recommend for you to do them, every year or every other year, depending upon how big your planting is and how into it you are. But foliar analysis really will help you gauge how well the plant is taking up the nutrients so that you can make amendments. The soil test, you could have the most perfect soil, and sometimes it just takes a while for the plant to get it. Maybe you don't have the pH quite right, and that's not going to be shown to you unless you have a soil test. So hopefully, yeah, it's kind of both of them in tandem, but I rely most on foliar analyses once the planting is in.
Okay. Tell us again where you send to get the particular soil test.
So for fruit, I like it's called Dairy One Lab. It's out in Ithaca, and they have a subset of that lab, which is called Agro One. And if you Google Dairy One and you go to soil test on their platform, on their website, it will show you can download the forms for free. It'll give you the instructions for how to take the soil test, which is a composite test. So you want to take like 12 to 15 subsamples and mix them together and send that in for each of your areas. And I just really like Dairy One because it's, it has Cornell analyses, Cornell recommendations, and it's linked to your soil type. So that's why I recommend that.
Okay. One other question, it's a little off topic. I live near Cross Gates, Albany. Where can I get the best quality and quantity of fruit plants?
So that's a great question. And you know what? At the end of this presentation, we will go back online and I'll show you some fabulous tools that I think you're going to love. We've got a nursery thing for berries, for tree fruit, and for grapes. There are some, I think there's some nurseries recommended on the fruit website. But I would encourage you to investigate the mail order nurseries because they have the widest selection. You could get good quality things locally, but your selection will be smaller.
Okay, so we're caught up now.
Okay.
We'll let you go ahead, Laura.
Okay, back to the birds. So bird damage. So part of the care and maintenance, there are some things, and I'm going to talk about the things that are they go across all fruit crops. And bird damage is one of the biggest problems, especially for blueberries, cherries, and apples. Birds absolutely love those 3 fruit. They also will damage raspberries. They'll also damage strawberries. They'll certainly damage peaches. But for some reason, the bird damage is just astronomically greater in these crops. So really, if you're going to have a good thriving fruit planting, you're going to have to figure out what to do for the birds. And there's a couple of different things. You can use, right here, this one on my left, I think it'll be your left too. Oh, darn it. If I could get this in the slideshow, I could use the pointer, and I think that would be a lot better. Hold on, I'm going to try again. Slideshow. From slide. No, it won't do it. Ah, I don't understand. Okay. So this one right here is just some flashy like aluminum strips or some like flashing what's the name of that? Anyway, looks like aluminum foil, but it's a lot
Is it like Mylar?
lighter. Mylar, thank you. Mylar strips, and that it reflects the sun, and that can be a pretty good deterrent. This is an example of a bird distress call, which you can use a little solar powered thing and use it, but honest to goodness, I hate these things. They're just so annoying. A cannon, which is usually gas or propane powered here, can also help startle birds. Some scare eye balloons, some stuffed predators like owls or other hunting birds can do it. And then this is a picture in the lower left-hand corner of a laser, and we've had lots of success with lasers, but still, all of these things together do not, netting, and this is a pretty fancy netting. This is what we call smart net, and it's on a big commercial planting, but it's super effective. So netting of whatever kind you use, I would encourage you to investigate that. And having it up on a frame somehow, so you don't have to try to sneak under it and get your hair caught in it. And if it's lying on the bushes, the birds just sit on the top of it and peck through, so it's not very effective. So bird control is a huge piece, a huge puzzle to solve before you can have a real good planting. And then rodent damage, woodchucks and bunnies are big problems, but these little critters, voles, pine voles and meadow voles are the worst. And it looks pretty innocuous, right? This small little hole. But if you dug around in that mulch, these tunnels go all over the place. They chew on roots. They just disrupt the soil around the roots so much that the plant fails and doesn't get good root soil contact. So that's a real big problem. So voles are hugely problematic. One of the things you can do is use snapback traps right in the run. You can also, if you want to use bait, you can use PVC pipe and stick the bait in the pipe, and they love to be in those little small pipes. Put it right in the run, and they will eat that poison. A lot of people don't like to use poison, but if you've got a huge vole problem, it might be your only choice. Gosh, everything seems, oh, there we go. Keep losing my little pointer. There we go. And lastly is deer damage. I should have, this is some damage from the stripped canes. Deer love apples, young apple trees. They absolutely adore strawberries. There is not a fruit crop that they detest, but they really love strawberries and apples. And you can use urine, bobcat urine or some other kinds of urines as a scare thing. You can use hot pepper sprays. You can use, there's another thing. It's like offal. It's OFFAL. It's plant skid. And that's like, from a slaughterhouse, and it's kind of concentrated, and you can reconstitute that and spread it around. Stinks to high heaven, but that does help deter them. But fencing, fencing is it. That really does the best job. So I don't want to belabor that, but those are the things that are hardest. They're really the hardest things to solve in a fruit planting. And I'm going to get down here. Okay. So before I move to pest control, do we have any questions about little vertebrates and birds and big vertebrates like deer? Anybody else have any questions? Unfortunately, those are going to be the hardest things to control. It'll make pest management look like a piece of cake. So one of the things that you'll have to decide when you start managing your pests. I mean, we live in a very moist, well, this year wasn't a very good example of that. It was nice and dry, which is great. And I think your fruit plants probably appreciated it being less humid than it has in some years past. But for the most part, our environment in the Northeast is quite wet. And when you have moist air, high humidity, You're going to get a lot of fungi. You could get a lot of insect pressure. And so you have to decide, do you want to have an intensive approach where you're going to be using a combination fruit tree spray every single week, right? Green tip every week until harvest, which is certainly one way you could go. I wouldn't recommend it. Or do you want to do just a laissez-faire approach and just see what happens? I mean, honestly, a lot of people get very good quality fruit doing that and avoid all the complications of using pesticides, whether they're organic or not. It is not fun to spray pesticides. So one of the resources that we have is this Apple IPM for beginners, and this is a really great set of fact sheets. It's located at that particular URL, which we'll go through a little bit. But this gives you the whole kind of step-by-step, the understanding of integrated pest management, which is what IPM stands for, and then focuses in on some of the most important pests. So this is just a picture of one of them. It sets out this whole scouting calendar, which is all keyed into the phenological stage of the plant. So here we have a dormant bud, and it gives you actually what you need to do in order to avoid some of these really tough pests. So pruning out all the cankers, whether it's fire blight, whether it's another kind of canker, and burning the cuttings, that is your pest action at that stage of the plant. And it goes right down through and talks about every single one. So I would strongly recommend you take a look at that if you're growing apples. The phenology, so these are pictures of both gooseberry and red currant phenology. The phenology of all these tree fruit is going to be very important for you to have a good understanding what it means to, when somebody says tight cluster or the bud burst to grape stage as it does in the ribes. Hold on, I keep losing my little, you know what, I'm gonna stop sharing just for a second because I want to try to go back and get that blasted thing to work right for me. Okay, let's see if it'll do it. Ah, that's really annoying, David. I'm sorry. I can't see my little pointer all the time, but anyway, this just gives you the name of the stage, and that will help you use some of the recommendations, whether they're on the back of a pesticide bottle or whether they're in the Cornell guidelines. Knowing the stage, the phenological stage, is really important to pest management, and it'll also help you align with when do the pests appear. Oh, you don't have to worry about this until bud burst. Oh, you don't have to worry about that pest until green fruit, and then you can take action. So the phenology of the plant is really, really important. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
We do have one question in the chat or in the Q&A box.
Okay.
Is there a natural organic repellent? As I love animals and do not want to kill them?
Repellent for the rodents and things, I'm assuming, like the deer. Yes, actually, that hot pepper spray is definitely organic. Even plant skid, I think, is certified OMRI approved. So even though it sounds pretty disgusting, it does work. I mean, even bone meal will, to some extent, repel some animals, but it'll draw other carnivore type animals, which actually maybe is a good thing, so they can eat the voles and kind of keep the natural circle of life going. It's very difficult. You know, we don't recommend, I try not to recommend, one of the very best rodenticides is a zinc phosphide treated corn, and that is now restricted use only. And I would definitely not suggest that to homeowners, because if off-target animals ate that, it's very toxic. But it does a great job if you've got a real problem, for especially for voles, which is our primary thing that we're using that for. We're not really using it for rabbits. You can put hardware cloth around the base of trees or net over the top of bushes to keep the rabbits out. But those voles are super duper hard to keep out. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I think a lot of the
Okay.
repellents are probably organic, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. But unfortunately, they are not terribly effective for the long term. So you have to continually reapply them. Most of them are somewhat water soluble. So after a good heavy rain, you'll have to get right back out there and reapply. And the other challenge is that these critters, they're smarter than we are. They get used to things, and you just have to change your tactic. That's especially true with birds, but for all of the animals. Okay. All right. Let me see if I can go down. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a few blueberry diseases specifically. I'm not going to go through every single pest of all of the fruit crops, but I just want to try to help people understand how important, making sure you know what the pest is, and B, what the life cycle of the pest is, so that you can figure out that appropriate management technique. So this is called blueberry anthracnose. It has a fairly distinctive, I say it looks distinctive here. I mean, certainly the fruit end of it is really distinctive. You see on that little dried up blueberry, it's very shriveled, and then down below you have the kind of orangey pink pustules, and that stuff looks kind of oozy. So that is what we call a fruit rot. And in the winter, blueberry anthracnose can also show some of these stem lesions, which is how that those spores are. There's little tiny pustules on the bark, and those spores shoot out, and then they reinfect the flowers in the spring, which results in this blueberry rot. And so understanding that, so if you have anthracnose problems, you're probably definitely going to have some twig anthracnose, and you are going to want to try to spray your blueberry crop right before it blooms, right before it has open blooms. And the reason being is that fungicide will give it some protection, and then when these little pustules on the twig open up and spew spores, hopefully it will be fairly, it will be protected. You may have to reapply the fungicide after bloom as another protectant, just to try to eradicate it even from the bloom. But that first one is super important. So the key to this, obviously, is not to forget. And so putting it in your smartphone, we know that most bloom happens sometime in mid-May-ish, depending upon the cultivar. So if you put down like May 10th, put a little note to yourself, so check blueberries, make sure to spray for blueberry anthracnose in your phone. That'll pop up as a reminder, and voila, hopefully you will be ready to take control of that. And that same strategy is going to work for all of the fruit rots, whether it's powdery mildew, whether it's botrytis, especially botrytis, whether it's, let's see, we've got one more here, mummyberry is another one. Mummyberry is going to be infecting even a little sooner. So you might want to have that note in your phone a little bit earlier than May 10th. But understanding how the fungus works, what the life cycle is, and when the vulnerable stage of the plant is, so that you can take action. Does anybody have any questions about fruit rot control? This goes for everything: apple scab, brown rot, black rot, all of these things. Fruit rots are super important to understand that. Okay, I'm gonna just assume that nobody has a question.
I
So
think
here's
we're good.
another example of a type of disease. It's not a fruit rot, it's a canker disease. And this doesn't bother the fruit buds or the fruit, it just kills off canes and wood. The problem with this is that, yes, it's easy to see that flagging, like those dead canes in the middle of the summer, but you can also, right, that lower one, that's Phomopsis, that is not Anthracnose, and boy, don't they look similar. So this is where you need to have some help, and you could take that to your master gardeners or send it into the diagnostic lab at Cornell to try to get that information. But that ID piece is really important to being able to take the next step of management. And it's very tricky to do that with some of these diseases. This particular one, the reason I wanted to show this, for those of you that have blueberries, if you think you have canker, which has become more and more prevalent in our Eastern New York region, you might want to try to spray lime sulfur this late fall, early winter, when the plants have dropped all their leaves. Lime sulfur is an organic compound, an organic chemical that will protect your plants and hopefully, essentially, almost dry out the that infection area right there on the twig. So that's a really good and easy thing to apply. And there are some other diseases that if you think you have something, there are a few times in the fall that you can spray for them, but most of our sprays are done in the spring. And I know somebody had a question earlier, Carol sent me a question about dormant oil in the fall. The only time I would encourage you to spray dormant oil in the fall is if you knew you had a terrible problem with, say, scale, or you had a really bad problem with aphids or mites. This year was a terrible insect year, so that could very well be. So dormant oil, hopefully waiting, I mean, actually, if the leaves were off the trees and it was 50 degrees, that's a perfect time, because the insects still have to be out and about, and the dormant oil goes onto the tree and smothers those soft-bodied insects. So that's its mode of action, smothering. And so that's why you would do a fall application. But most of the time, we recommend that happen just before bud break in the dormant season in the spring, as these little soft-bodied insects and mites start popping out of dormancy, coming out from under the bark scales, and then that's when you get out and spray the dormant oil. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so I do want to show you, I'm going to stop sharing again. We're going to go to the fruit website and talk a little bit more about what is there. Are there any questions that I should know about?
Let's see. If that was my question about blister mites and gypsy moths, I wasn't planning to spray in the fall. If it was someone else, carry on.
That might have been your question. I don't know. But let me try to get out of the web soil survey now, and we're back, and I have this. So let's go to berries. And so this is the Cornell Berry website. It's blogs.cornell.edu/berries. And there's going to be grapes and tree fruit here too. And this is just a treasure trove of resources for folks that want to know more about fruit. And it is aimed at a commercial audience, but there are a few tools that I think you guys are gonna love. And one of them is this berry diagnostic tool. And they're working to revamp this. They're trying to put new photos and everything. And you can start by choosing a crop. So Cornell hosted the strawberry, blueberry, and raspberries, and then they link to other diagnostic tools. For instance, blackberry diagnostic tool that's hosted by North Carolina State. And there's a Connecticut ag station for currants and ribes. And then there's some other things at UMass. So, you know, we make the most of what we've got for different things. So let's look at strawberries. So this little key, so what symptoms do you see? Whole plants. Plants are wilting and collapsing in a young planting, or plants are wilting and collapsing in an older planting. Let's look at that. And it's just a dichotomous key. Plants exhibit poor growth in early spring, flowering is sparse, roots appear healthy, but the crown is actually hurt. And so you can go to that and it'll show you the picture of what winter injury looks on, like on the crowns of these strawberry plants. The roots, to be honest with you, these roots don't look particularly healthy, but these roots look pretty good. They should look white. But then you definitely see that the growing point is rotted out. So that had some winter injury. So this is a really great tool, has all kinds of diseases and insects that are here. This is in blueberries. We'll look at leaves. Leaves are unusually colored, spotted, or necrotic. That means browning. And you can go down, and then what color are those leaves? They're light green or yellow. Yellowing is interveinal. Yellowing is veinal. Reddening is interveinal. Red spots are on the upper leaf surface only. And so you can look at this and voila, there's a picture of what we call red ring spot virus. And that is going to be the first thing you're going to want to know is what are you dealing with? And then you can move on. Anybody have any questions about the berry diagnostic tool? Okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
This goes back to the wildlife, I think.
That's all right.
I'm not quite sure what this means. It says, so black pepper spray is what she said.
Actually, red pepper. I think it's usually red pepper, but I don't know if it, and you can buy this commercially. I wouldn't try to make up your own. I think it would be far more expensive to put peppers into a solution, you know what I'm saying? So I would buy it. I can't remember the trade names, but there's several different ones, and they are readily available at a good garden center or online.
There used to be one called Miller's hot sauce. I don't know, was that pepper spray?
Yeah, that is.
Maybe that.
And that's the same company that sells Miller's lime sulfur. So that's an organic company. So you could buy your lime sulfur and your hot sauce in one easy order online.
I thought that was a good name, Miller's hot sauce. It sounds like some Cajun or
invented
cuisine.
So the other really great tool that I want to show you is this nursery guide for berry and small fruits. And so this, I think, is absolutely the best. All these crop cultivars, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, cranberries, gooseberries, hascaps, hardy kiwi, et cetera, are all listed here. And the rest of them are out here. So we're going to go to elderberries over here, just for kicks and giggles. We're going to look at, let's start with American elderberries. That's what's number 1 here. And I'm going to look for, I'm going to look at blue. So there are 2 nurseries. It's Burnt Ridge or One Green World. These are all the names of these nurseries: Hartman's, Honeyberry USA, all these different nurseries. And when you click on that, let's go to, all right, I'll try One Green World. Click on that. It brings you to the list of nurseries. And some of them have websites and some of them do not. Usually it brings you right to the one that you want. This is a little funny, so maybe it got moved. Uh-oh. One Green World might not be on there anymore. Hold on, let me just try this again. Hartman's, I'm gonna go for the, so here is Hartman's up on the top. Hartman's Plant Company. It gives you an email. It doesn't give you the website. Oh, it looks like they may have taken the websites down. Oh, I'm a little sad about that. I used to love that. Or maybe it's hyperlinked. Hyperlinked, yes. So it's all hyperlinked to, great. So now we're looking at NorCal Nursery. The great thing is you can check the availability of that particular thing. You can easily compare prices. It's just, I think it's a really great tool. So just wanted you guys to see that.
That's really nice.
It is really terrific. It's really great. And then there's just a ton of different things here. Like here's a fall strawberry maintenance, berry blog posts. My colleague Esther Kibbe contributes to this blog, so it's free. And there's a bunch of information about taking care of strawberries and how to understand some of the fall diseases and things like that. So all of this is available on the blog. I sometimes have things on the blog, but I'm in a different program in Eastern New York and we have an enrollment. So our growers enroll to be in the program and then we have to send their newsletter straight to them. So let me go to grapes just so that you can see what's there. And this is the grape website. There's some webinars that are recorded that if you're a super grape person, you might want to listen to some of these webinars. Just because they're oriented towards commercial growers does not mean that you can't access them. It's all here. But you just should realize that sometimes they'll be talking about topics and management tools that are not available to you if you don't have a pesticide license. So if you wanted to listen to the Cornell Virtual Tuesday Timely Topics webinar, here's winemaking practices for dealing with high pH. So who knows? Considerations for vineyard establishment, biology and management of post-raise and fruit rats. All of these things are could be really helpful to you guys as avid home fruit gardeners. Quickly, we'll go to tree fruit. I hope you can see all of this. If you're into hard cider, you can look at the Cornell hard cider resources. The Apple IPM for beginners is what I showed you. Let's go to see what the hard cider has to do in case you're into that. Well, there's a video. They give more, not a ton of obviously important stuff here, but you never know what they might be adding. These are fairly active pages. So that is that's the fruit website. And now I'd kind of like to just open it up for questions, if that's okay with you, David.
Yeah, we have one more question that's here. It says, do you recommend buying from more local or regional growers as opposed to Pacific Northwest growers?
So that's a great question. We don't have a ton. We do have a few berry nurseries. Norse Farms in Deerfield, Mass. is a very excellent nursery. We have some nurseries in Ohio. There's a few in Canada and Nova Scotia, so Quebec and Nova Scotia. And those I would certainly recommend. Many of our strawberry plants come from California. There's a lot of great nurseries in California, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend them. For tree fruit, I think trying to buy from a nursery that is a more temperate climate, similar to our own, because I have seen and heard that if a grower or a gardener buys something, say from a nursery that's in like Tennessee or Missouri, and they might supply some of the box stores, that tree has not adapted. It's genetically appropriate for our weather, but it hasn't adapted its cold hardiness to our weather by growing in it for a couple of years. So you might set yourself up for a little bit more winter injury. Within a year or so, the plant will be totally adapted, but that first year could be a little dicey. And that's one reason to buy from temperate nurseries. And as far as local or not local, I always prefer local. It's just that I don't have a lot of local nurseries to recommend to you. And I think it's really great to try different plants, and some of those Pacific Northwest nurseries have a phenomenal selection.
Okay. Who else has a question? I know I have one. Laura?
Yes? What is it?
My question is, we often get somebody that has old fruit trees, old apple trees, and they want to rejuvenate these old apple trees. Is there any hope for these things?
Yes, I think there's a lot of hope for them as long as they have they understand the amount of work that's going to be involved, and the fact that it will never be, that old apple tree will never be transformed into a 7-year-old Honeycrisp, no matter what you do. So, you know, a lot of these older apple trees are seedling apples, so they may be, you know, they may be in a variety that we don't even know what it is. There are some heirloom varieties around that you can really easily tell. There's a sugar. Yeah, you know what? I did mean to show you some pruning. Uh-oh. Sorry, you guys. We should probably do pruning too. But when you trim an old apple tree, you just have to realize that you can get in there and really do a good job removing all the dead, the crossing, the water sprouts, the suckers, get rid of all that, and then maybe 1 or 2 large, you know, really dominant tree one of the scaffolds. And then just try to continue to thin out the crown and bring back the overall size of the plant. And that is going to happen over the course of 3 to 5 years. And you'll need a chainsaw, and you'll need ladders, and you may or may not want to spray it. Again, it depends on how much you care about the quality of the apple. But that's one way to go about it. And the second year, the year after you do that initial pruning, is going to be the hardest, because pruning invigorates plants, and you end up having tons of shoots come flying out of the tree, and you just have to get in there and cut them all off again, plus perhaps another 1 or 2 large scaffold branches, so that you can continue to reduce the overall crown. You never want to take more than 1/3 of the tree. That's a guideline anyway, in order to kind of keep that root shoot balance in line and not shock it too much. Does that make sense, David? I mean, we could talk about, like, you shouldn't prune back to just a bud. If it's a 4-inch, you know, you should prune back to a smaller lateral branch and things like that.
Right.
Probably should have covered. We could go to some pruning slides if you.
Yeah, we do have a question here about pruning.
Okay.
It says, do you prune these plants? If yes, when? So yes, I think pruning would be a good thing.
Yes, pruning is a good one. So when is an easy one. Almost all of these plants are pruned right before they break dormancy. So in the late winter. Yes, Glenn wants me to go to pruning. Okay. So hold on, share screen. I'm going to go, you know what? I have to go and pull it up first. Hold on, I gotta reduce the slide, reduce this, turn off that, turn off my slides. Sorry for talking to myself. Let's go to the, okay.
I think a lot of people have questions about pruning. It's
Okay.
It's sort of a difficult topic if you're just starting out, because you don't want to hurt the plant,
Yes.
and people are a little concerned about that sort of
Yeah.
thing. I was just talking to someone, I think it was last week, and I said, well, you should prune it during the dormant season, like in February or March. And they said, oh, it's too cold to go outside then.
Yes, that is true, isn't it? All right, let me see if I can get back to this. I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to go here. Hopefully we're going to get there. How does that look?
Oh, we can see that.
Great. Okay. Move this little taskbar thingy up here. So basically there's 3 different kinds of pruning cuts that you make when you're pruning any kind of woody plant. And a heading back cut, which is just taking the leader, whether it's the apical meristem on a whip like this, or whether it's actually this is also a heading back cut where you're taking off that leader thing. And think about what happens when you prune, or you pinch back coleus. When you remove the apical meristem, or the growing point, you actually cut off the auxin supply, and auxin inhibits the bud break of these lateral buds that are not, you can't even see them, but they exist. So these buds, once this auxin supply, the tip is taken off, all these buds break. And that's what you want to have happen when you do this intentionally. Pinching is just talking about taking green, easily vegetative tissue, not woody tissue off. And then a thinning out cut is when you bring back an entire branch to its point of origin. So you're removing it. The nice thing about that cut is that it doesn't result in so much growth, so much lateral bud break right around that cut. It's a much friendlier cut from the perspective of just not having so many things there. So pruning, again, dormant prune February to April. You want to train during the spring and summer. So young plants, you're training them. And 2 things, you want to encourage productive fruiting wood, so horizontal wood and horizontal branches. And so this is a little slide that just shows about pulling these branches down on a small fruit tree so that you have, they become horizontal, because horizontal, not only the plant grows slower and stronger, but it also becomes more fruitful. So it has more fruit buds. And the other reason that you want to prune is to make sure that you maximize the light interception into the canopy. And this just shows you, if you had these fruits were in the center of the canopy, they really didn't color as well as out on the external part. So you want to make sure that fruit all through the canopy. And these are some diagrams that show, on big trees especially, the inner part of the tree is almost dark. It has very little light. And then you get most of your sunlight on the third of the tree that's out on the outside, which is another reason why the commercial fruit industry and even homeowners have gone to smaller trees, because more of the tree actually gets light. And so here's a small tree, an 8-foot-high tree, kind of trained in a pyramidal style central leader. And basically it would have a little bit of shade in the middle of the canopy, but most of the plant gets quite a bit of sun. So another reason, much more than, say, this larger 16-foot tree. So small is good from that perspective, and for ease of management. So there's all kinds of ways, and we're not going to talk about espaliers, but this is once you get the hang of pruning, and if you love it, you can create all kinds of wonderful sculptural type plants. But primarily when we're talking about apples and pears, we're usually using the central leader method. And so when the plant is early, we're going to try to create those horizontal branches by using clothespins, just pushing those really tender shoots out horizontally. And then as the plant grows, you're going to remove some of the branches that overlap one another. And again, using spreaders to kind of spread that tree out. But basically, the overall shape of the tree is pyramidal, almost Christmas tree-like if you just drew, with the canopy there. That's your goal. It often doesn't look exactly like that, but making sure you have evenly spaced main branches, scaffold branches, and then have those scaffolds be towards horizontal is what you're trying to get. And so this is an example of the clothespins, trimming things out, and just pushing those branches down. That's not a particularly good. But bearing trees, removing the diseased, broken, and dead, avoiding small cuts, focusing on those thinning out cuts. And these side branches, if you've got to remove them, don't remove it to, like if you were going to take out a really big branch and you said, oh, I'm going to just bring it back to this little tiny branch, don't do that, because you'll have a whole bunch of witch's broom. It'll really react like a heading back cut. Bring it all the way back to the point of connection. Water sprouts, suckers, root suckers, crown suckers, those things all have to be removed. And avoid pruning too much. This is something that we want to avoid, but that's kind of like what happens. See, when I was talking about those heading back cuts, you get this proliferation of small growth, and that's, you don't want that. So do we have berry growers? Because I could go in and try to find some of those berry pruning, some of the multi-stem shrubs that might be helpful.
Sure. We have a couple other apple questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you ever use root pruning as a technique to control size with fruit trees?
You know, from a horticultural perspective, yes, you can do that. We don't do that very often in a commercial sense because we control the size with the rootstock. But you could go ahead and use root pruning very judiciously. It's pretty easy to stunt a plant pretty significantly if you go crazy root pruning. And I don't know if it's still gonna, you know, if you're trying to bring a seedling tree down again, you're just not gonna accomplish that with root pruning. It's not gonna happen. So it kind of depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, a lot of the fruit apple trees you would buy would have dwarfing rootstocks, right?
Right.
So I don't know, maybe people don't know about that.
Did we talk about dwarfing stocks last week, about the choosing?
Oh, maybe you did, and I wasn't here.
I thought we did, but boy, I get so confused on some of these different things that I'm doing for people. If we didn't, we can go, and even if you did and you want to see it again, we can go over it.
Oh,
How
yeah.
would that be?
Somebody did say, yeah, we talked about rootstocks and graft.
Okay, okay.
I wasn't here, so I'm messing you up, Laura.
That's all right. I'm messing myself up.
We have one other apple question.
Okay.
And it was something you did touch upon earlier.
Okay.
Because I may have missed it, but what do you use to spray apple trees? And that you mentioned that IPM guide, which I think is a wonderful resource.
Yeah, so you use a lot of different things to spray apple trees, which is why I'm not getting into it in depth, because it depends on what your problem is. So if you have apple scab, you would use a fungicide, and you would probably give it a minimum of 3 sprays in order to control apple scab. But if you have a fruit rot problem, you would really focus on the pre-bloom, right before bloom area, and you would use probably a different fungicide. There are some very generic types of fungicides like Captan, and some people use Bordeaux mixture for some of these things. That's an early treatment. But it really depends. There's no way that I can tell you what to use. And there is something that's a kind of an easy thing to go to, is these complete orchard sprays, which have a miticide, an insecticide, and a fungicide all wrapped up in one chemical. And then you could kind of spray it. But remember what that little cartoon said, that if you use that, you're killing off beneficials when you may not even have a mite problem. It's easy, but it's not very environmentally friendly. So you have to make the choice about how, is ease of application the important thing to you or not?
That makes sense.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. So very quickly on multi-stem shrubs. So a blueberry is what we call a multi-stem shrub. There are many canes coming up out of the ground. These canes are what bears fruit on it, and blueberries tend to be, they have about an 8-year-old cane is about the apex of its vigor, and after that the vitality and the fruitfulness of it starts to decline. So we usually remove those older canes from the ground level, because just like an apple tree, if you cut right here, you can initiate growth from the crown, and those buds right at the crown level will sprout and send up new canes right from the crown. We don't want this, see in this before, we don't want these new canes to come off of other canes, because it's just complicated, it's not as strong, it makes this whole cane, which is so low, vulnerable to breakage, etc. So getting rid of this is important. So in blueberries, we prune pretty aggressively every year, and I would take out at minimum 2 of the oldest canes, and then I would thin out some other canes, like you got a lot of these branchy stuff that's really low, I'd get that out of there. And when you remove some of those old canes, you remove a lot of this branchy stuff up here, and your resultant plant looks pretty sparse, but it's much healthier than it was prior to pruning. So that's very similar to like a forsythia, etc. It's not much different, but basically that's that. Any other questions on pruning?
Yeah, we've got, let's see. Any tips for pruning Concord grapes?
So Concord grapes, I'll see if I can find another picture, but basically grapes can be pruned very hard. And you shouldn't worry about hurting the cane. The cane is super vigorous. Think about what you're doing when you're when you look at grapes that are, actual sugar. It's not coming up again. God darn it. Okay. Let me go back and I'll share it for you guys, even though it's not the best format. Okay, so you can remove up to 90% of the growth, and the buds are on the 1-year-old wood. So the new shoot comes out, sets its buds during the fall of the year, and then that following year is what that is going to bring, that's going to have buds. So look at this. This particular thing had a lot of growth, and they pruned it way back. They left 4 canes that came out, and then those buds are what's going to yield the fruit. And it's exactly the same. All grapes are like this. So if you were trying to prune to an arbor, you would just consider, what was the last year's cane? I want to keep as many of them because I want shade on the arbor, but I also want fruit. So you take off all the old stuff and you keep doing that, and you kind of bring it into cycle. The first year that you do an aggressive pruning on a grape vine that hasn't been pruned very heavily, you may see a reduction in yield, but it's a quality of yield. And then actually, as you continue to prune it and care for it appropriately, you're going to see really good quality fruit.
Good.
Does that help?
Yeah, that was good. Where can we get Snapdragon apple? I've never heard of that one.
Snapdragon is a new one, and you cannot get Snapdragon because Snapdragon and Ruby Frost were an experimental breeding thing that they did with Cornell University breeder Susan Brown, developed these apples, and she worked with a co-op of commercial growers, and they essentially owned it for the first couple of years. So they were the only ones that were able to get that variety of apple for, I think it was 5 years. Now it might be available to some other growers, but I don't think there is any stock available yet to home gardeners. And that's often the case with really popular apples. We get the dregs, the home gardeners get the dregs, and that's in cultivars and in quality. I hate to tell you, I hate to burst your bubble on that, but it's the truth. So the really vigorous whips and stuff go to all the commercial growers, and we get what's left over in the nursery. So Snapdragon, to my knowledge, is not yet available to home gardeners. It may be available within the next 3 or so years. So hopefully. Yes, there's a lot of orchards in the Hudson Valley that carry Snapdragon, and up in Lake Champlain region. It's a wonderful small apple. And for those of you who have, really like apples, I also recommend Ruby Frost. Ruby Frost is a late ripening apple, absolutely gorgeous apple, and it keeps forever. So it's a beautiful apple to have if you want to store some in a root cellar or what have you. Really nice. Good eating apple, both dessert apples.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Frida mentions that you can buy those in Valencia at Golden Harvest.
Great.
Yeah. There was another question here. Let me see. To make it go up here. Come on. How long can you expect blueberry bushes to be productive?
They can be productive. I have seen very wonderful plantings that are close to 60 years old. That requires a lot of dedication, but they can be that old and still be wonderfully productive. We are having some more problems in Eastern New York with some viruses, which are shortening the lives of some plantings, but they have the capabilities of lasting that long. I would say at least 40 years of production, and then they may start really declining, but you can make them go longer. And some of the old seedling apples, those orchards, they're like 100 years old. If they were well cared for, they last a long time. The dwarfing stocks, not so much. You might be able to get 20 to 25 years at the most out of a dwarfing rootstock.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
We're all really interesting. I'm just trying to see if we missed anything. Anybody else have questions? I am new to fruit gardening. Can you share the links?
You know what? I'm going to send David the PowerPoint as a PDF so he can send it out to you guys, if that's okay with you, David.
That would be good. That would be good.
And that has the links on it. So you'll be able to go through and kind of click on those and explore that resource site. I just would strongly encourage you to spend some of your indoor time this winter looking through that. The other thing I want to encourage you to do, if you're really thinking about, and you've done your homework, like from what we talked about last week, you figured it out, you know what your soil is, you've been amending it, and you haven't yet ordered your plants, don't hesitate to order plants, because it's not just COVID, but it's kind of COVID. Nurseries are selling out, and they have been really working hard to keep up with demand even before COVID, but now it's just crazy. I have some commercial growers that have not been able to get their orders filled, and even this year they're kind of worried. So
yeah, everything in horticulture is in short supply.
I know it.
Even grass seed.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's just crazy.
Yeah, I waited too long this spring to buy my seed potatoes, and I almost didn't get any. So it's really true. I mean, start thinking about next year, like now.
So Vishnu, I don't think the tree fruit website has nurseries on it, but if you Google nursery sources for apples. You'll come up with things. And I would encourage you, you see things like in those inserts for newspapers, there always used to be some things selling. Try to go to something that really looks like it's really truly just for tree fruit. If it's selling everything, all they're doing is reselling stuff. So you want to know that it's a nursery that is growing its own plants. It's certified them. Some of the nurseries now will certify things virus-free, and that's the key to getting a good quality plant.
What do you think about someplace like Fedco?
I think Fedco actually has good quality stuff. It doesn't have the biggest selection. And I do know that for most of their fruit plants, they're buying them elsewhere and then reselling. But I like Fedco as a company. I think they're very honest, and they'll try to work with you if you have bad. I mean, that's another thing. These things, a lot of this stuff is dug now or very soon, and then it's stored in a cooler all winter, and then it's sent to you. So, sometimes this stuff just doesn't look that good when it gets there. So if it's slimy, if there's any kind of smell, if you break it open and it just looks dead inside, call them immediately, because it's gotten some kind of cold damage that they're not going to grow. So you got to get ahead of that.
Yes. Somebody asked, how do you spell Fedco? It's Fedco, and it's a nursery up in Maine. So they have a lot of kind of really hardy New England, upstate New York sort of stuff.
Right. We used to have St. Lawrence nurseries, which I always loved, but I think they're defunct. I don't know. Do you know, David? Last time I tried to find their website, I knew that they had sold to a different owner. Then they were up and running. And then the last time I looked, which was just sometime this summer, they seemed like they were down again. So that's unfortunate, because they sold really winter hardy varieties.
And didn't we have a big grower out in Canandaigua, like in the Finger Lakes, that was a big fruit tree nursery?
Yes, Miller's. And Miller's, I don't believe they're doing much of it. They may have a small thing, but I think actually they're buying a lot of their stuff in.
Oh.
They're not growing it themselves. Yeah.
We have a question about Master Gardener classes. The Master Gardener classes are, well, we were going to do a class this fall, but due to COVID, we aren't having that. So we're hoping to have another Master Gardener training next fall. So I would urge anybody that was interested in that to talk to their cooperative extension office in their county, and see if they can be put on the list for the notification of the next training.
Actually, that makes me think that some of these folks might be interested in taking the Cornell Small Farms courses. They are 6-week online courses, pretty intensive, because they're really aimed at trying to train farmers. But there is a tree fruit one taught by my colleague, Mike Bastow and Anna Wallace, a former colleague, and then a former colleague, Amy Ivy and Jim O'Connell, teach the berry one. And these are really there's a lot more detail, because they can go over 6 weeks. There's homework, there's a lot of resources. They're a couple $100 to take them. That's just the way it is. But if you Google Cornell Small Farms, and then look for their courses, you can find all different kinds of things in gardening. And if you're willing to pay the money and put the time and effort in for the online intensive thing, you can learn quite a lot.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, the Master Gardener class covers a little bit of everything. So it's like a shotgun approach to the world of horticulture.
Yeah, the Master Gardener thing is the best, because you get to know other people and all their wealth of knowledge from other gardeners. And I don't blame you for not doing it during COVID shutdown, because it just would lose a ton, not being able to have people talk to one another. Yeah.
It's very much a people-oriented training, that's for sure. Do you recommend guerrilla gardening where we plant trees on the side of the road?
Like fruit trees and stuff?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's your own property, it's great. I do have I mean, fruit trees are not the best street trees. So I guess depending upon what your road looks like, they often don't perform that well in stressful conditions. So some of the berries might do better, or I don't know, you could try them. I feel like street trees, Washington Avenue Extension, I'm not familiar with that, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of a busy road probably.
Yeah.
Fruit trees are kind of difficult on a road, I think. And, you know, probably not the best soil in those kind of environments.
Personally, I think you should try to get cemeteries and stuff to put. I mean, they have lovely landscaped areas. They could, if you're going to do food gardening, why not in a cemetery? If it was my cemetery, like if I was buried there, I would love that.
And there'd be a lot of bone meal in the soil.
Yes.
So does anybody else have a question or a comment for Laura? Let's see. It just says, which berries do you recommend for growing in Albany?
Honestly, you can grow a lot of different berries. If you have low pH soil, blueberries are wonderful because I think they're a long-lasting and fun plant to grow, and they have relatively few pest problems. If you have a small vegetable garden and you'd like to grow strawberries, doing either June bearing or day neutrals. I really like day neutral strawberries for the home gardener. So that's a good one. Raspberries, I mean, any of those. And then you could try really unusual things like elderberries or ribes. Yes, 6.6 strawberry raspberry ground, that's for sure. And almost any of the other fruit, except for lingonberries, cranberries, and blueberries, because they're all in the ericaceous family and they like that low pH.
Yeah, we have so many people that want to grow blueberries, and they actually sometimes even plant them. And then they bring the soil in, and it's 7.8.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of high pH soil.
Yeah, especially in urban areas. I think because of the, building cement, it leaches and you end up getting really alkaline soils. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's difficult. So it's better to match your plant to the soil, at least a little bit.
Yes. Far better. Far better.
Where can we get this? Where can we get the best strawberry plants? And it says, but you can change pH in a small area, but that's not easy to do, really.
You can change pH. You can change it even on a big area, but it takes a long time, several years, depending upon how much of a change you make. And so say you had a 7.0 pH and you wanted to pull it down to 4.5, you would have to put so much sulfur on there that you're probably not going to be able to plant for several years because the soil becomes caustic. It'll burn the plant roots. So you have to let the pH drop. And then these plants, this soil always wants to go back. It wants to revert to its native pH. So you are going to be fighting this battle. Honestly, you would be better off not doing it. But having said that, I know literally everybody I say that to says, well, I think I can do it. And you can. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
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 And for berry plants, especially strawberry plants, I would encourage you try Norse Farms because they're over in Western Mass. They do a fabulous job. It's Nourse, and you can get a wide variety of berry plants from them. So especially strawberries, they've really made their name on strawberries, but they have ribes, they have blueberries, they have brambles, blackberries, and raspberries. So everything you could want. I from a berry perspective, I think that's the best nursery in the region.
That's good to know. All right. Okay. Well, Laura, you've been really great. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for having me. I hope that you have a great fall and good luck dreaming about gardening.